not a good position when I started opening that up. That's all. That's all it was. It is day 286 here in the classroom. We are here on December 17th. So 1 week away from Christmas Eve. I won't be celebrating unless I have my family back. Again. And who is the turd? Lucy, sit in your basket, please. In your basket, please. Get in your basket. Get in your basket. All the way she's laying on my blanket. Go on, in your basket. I can't find my book. Lucy, in your basket. What? In your basket. Good girl. Good girl. Go on. Good girl. I know. It's not as warm. There you go. Anyway. Lay down like that. Okay. I know I had the book right here. So where? Whoops. All right. Oh, there it is. I knew I put it on a shelf right here. Oh, right there, right on the shelf, right there. Chapter 2. We are on day 3. We had an introduction and then chapter 1. Let's get going. It takes us so long to get started. Not even 3 minutes. Shit it. Eating the other. Chapter 2. Eating the other. Desire and resistance. This is theory's acute dilemma that desire expresses itself most fully where only those absorbed in its delight and torments are present, that it triumphs most completely over other human preoccupations in places sheltered from view. Thus, it is paradoxically inviting that the secrets of desire come to light, that hegemonic impositions and their reversals, invasions and subversions are at their most bonus and active. Honest. It's in italic. Bonus should not have come to mind though before honest. I'm sure of that. At their most honest and active, and that the identities and disjunctures between felt passion and established culture place themselves on most vivid display. Joan Cox, The Oppositional Imagination. No comprendo nun. Within current debates about race and difference, mass culture is contemporary location that both publicly declares and perpetuates the idea that there is pleasure to be found in the acknowledgement and employment of racial difference. The commodification of otherness has been so successful because it is offered as a new delight, more intense, more satisfying than normal ways of doing and feeling. Within community culture, ethnicity becomes spice, seasoning that can liven up the dull dish that is mainstream white culture. Cultural taboos around sexuality and desire are transgressed and made explicit as the media bombards folks with the message of difference no longer based on the white supremacist assumption that blondes have more fun. And I find this whole argument very interesting as well, about ethnicity being the spice. And, you know, I agree. And being at least a little bit ethnic, even Ukrainian. I mean, you know, where is that in the whole popular economic scale? So, and I feel like ethnicity has taken a step back from entertainment industry, probably from all kinds of work, right? Starting with other work, but lastly, the entertainment industry, but certainly for the last 40 years. They have completely taken a step out of the entertainment industry. And here comes Marvel and CGI, and a script writes itself, especially if we are allowed to collect data from inside individuals' homes. Cultural taboos around sexuality and desire are transgressed and made explicit as the media bombard. I already said that. The real fun is to be had by bringing to the surface all those nasty, unconscious fantasies and longings about contact with the other embedded in the secret, not so secret, deep structures of white supremacy. In many ways, it is a contemporary rival of interest in the primitive with a distinctly postmodern slant, as Marianne Turgovnik argues in Gone Primitive Savage Intellects, Modern Lives. What is clear now is that the West's fascination with the primitive has to do with its own crisis in identity, with its own need to clearly demarcate subject and object, even while flirting with other ways of experiencing the universe. And this subject with object has all the intonation, demarcate subject and object, even from the very author herself, is too scientific. Why is there such a sterile approach, which was sort of the argument in the last chapter as well? I get it. You want to dance toe to toe with these scientists on their logic, but they don't give a shit about logic. Certainly from the standpoint of white supremacist capitalists, I mean, engaging in that kind of foreplay, during play, after play says it all. It says they don't care. And that, start again. Certainly from the standpoint of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, the hope is that desires for the primitive or fantasies about the other can be continually exploited, and that such exploitation will occur in a manner that reinscribes and maintains the status quo through guilt, shame, and power. Whether or not desire for contact with the other, for connection rooted in the longing for pleasure, can act as a critical intervention, challenging and subverting racist domination, inviting and enabling critical resistance, is an unrealized political possibility. Whether or not desire for contact with the other, for connection rooted in longing for pleasure, can act as a critical intervention, Who? What? I think if we go full tilt into our sexual categories and then see if we might be able to connect, that could work. That's what that's saying to me. Exploring how desire for the other is expressed, manipulated, and transformed by encounters with difference, and the different is a critical terrain that can indicate whether these potentially revolutionary longings are ever fulfilled. Contemporary working class British slang playfully converges the discourse of desire, sexuality, and the other, evoking the phrase getting a bit of the other as a way to speak about sexual encounter. Fucking is the other, displacing the notion of otherness from race, ethnicity, skin color. The body emerges as a site of contestation, where sexuality is the metamorphic other that threatens to take over, consume, transform via the experience of pleasure. And that, to me, is the game. That's the game right there that the white supremacists are playing. Desired and sought after sexual pleasure offers the consenting subject deconstructing notions of will, control, coercive domination. Commodity culture in the United States exploits conventional thinking about race, gender, and sexual desire by working both the idea that racial difference marks one as the other and the assumption that sexual agency expressed within the context of racialized sexual encounter is a conversation experience that alters one's place in participation in contemporary cultural politics. The seductive promise of this encounter is that it will counter the terrorizing force of the status quo that makes identity fixed, static, a condition of containment and death, and that it is this willingness to transgress racial boundaries within the realm of a sexual that eradicates the fear that one must always conform to the norm to remain safe. That is just such a good point. It's such a gambler's mentality, isn't it? That's what comes to mind. Yeah, I'm going to say it again. I'll read it and then I'll say it again. And that it is this willingness to transgress racial boundaries within the realm of the sexual that eradicates the fear that one must always conform to the norm and remain safe. And that has such a gambler's ring to it. That's a gambler's mentality right there. Right there. I'm on the straight and narrow, and everyone knows who I am. I can go to Sin City and do whatever I want. Everyone knows who I am. I gotta stop with the Sister Clarita conducting her orchestra. Is that you, Mary Pat? Daisy. Difference can seduce precisely because the mainstream imposition of sameness is a provocation that terrorizes. Yeah, so you've got these two opposite ends of terror. I'm no status quo if I'm a Zeus. I'm a Greek god, you son of a bitch. See the things AI can't understand? And so I'm no status quo. And let me show you who I can conquest. The person who hates me the most. Desire like you haven't seen it. Why? Because I'm a Greek god. How about that? And as Jean Baudrillard suggests in Fatal Strategies, provocation, unlike seduction, which allows things to come into play and appear in secret, dual and ambiguous, does not leave you free to be. It calls on you to reveal yourself as you are. It is always blackmail by identity and thus a symbolic murder, since you are never that except precisely by being condemned to it. And that's what I always say too. Yeah, you created your own fucking hell. That's exactly what you did, you stupid fucking asshole, with all of your power cravings. You created your own hell. To make oneself vulnerable to the seduction of difference, to seek an encounter with the other, does not require that one relinquish forever one's mainstream personality. When race and ethnicity become commodified as resources for pleasure, the culture of specific groups, as well as the bodies of individuals, can be seen as constituting an alternative playground where members of dominating races, genders, sexual practices affirm their power over an intimate relations in intimate relations with the other. While teaching at Yale, I walked one bright spring day in the downtown area of New Haven, which is close to campus and invariably brings one into contact with many of the poor black people who live nearby, and found myself walking behind a group of very blonde, very white, jock-type boys. The downtown area was often talked about as an arena where racist domination of blacks by whites was contested on the sidewalks, as white people, usually male, often jocks, use their bodies to force black people off the sidewalk, to push our bodies aside without ever looking at us or acknowledging our presence. And you can see that right there. And hey, what's the crime? What's the crime? Oh, who's going to confront the jock? And if someone does, the jock's gonna say, I didn't see him. I wasn't looking at him. I didn't see him. Yeah. And that's the whole thing. Because you are a jock and you do that to a black man. Okay. But that's not electric anymore for me. Let me do it to a black woman and let's see what happens. And we saw those videos of the way I saw those videos of the way those cops treated those black women. I don't see them anymore, and I don't want to look at them other than to know that they still exist out there. So, and then what's the crime? Well, nothing when the cops do it. When somebody gets upset because you did it to their black woman, and then the cops get involved, well, what's a man to do? And then what is a woman to do when you have set up this whole entire situation and she sees her black man getting punished for it? And then that's not enough anymore, because nobody even gives a shit about the Me Too movement. Even let's see if we can't do it to white women who are respected in the community because they stand against that kind of behavior. Feminists, known Christian traditional women who are also feminists. Let's see what we could do to them. I didn't see her there. I didn't know that was her house. I didn't know she was a psychologist. I thought she was depressed. We were told to pick up on aggressive behaviors. We were told she had a weapon and she was aggressive. What's a guy to do? What's a cop to do? Seemingly unaware of my presence, these young men talked about their plans to fuck as many girls from other racial ethnic groups as they could catch before graduation. They ran it down. Black girls were high on the list, Native American girls hard to find, Asian girls all lumped into the same category. Deemed easier to entice were considered prime targets. Talking about this overheard conversation with my students, I found that it was commonly accepted that one shopped for sexual partners in the same way one shopped for courses at Yale, and that race and ethnicity was a serious categorization on which selections were based. So I don't know about the way it's done, right, today, but we shopped for courses by standing in line and waiting to see if that course opened up. Are you telling me that's how the universities were run? I want to be in that girl's course. That line all of a sudden gets longer. There's an opening in the course, just happens to be an opening in that girl's course that she wants. Because that's what that's saying. It was, I mean, how do you associate those two shopping techniques? How do you associate shopping for courses at Yale and shopping for girls? How do you associate those two things? That is just really an incredible statement about our universities, for sure. Those big sex fucking traps for women. Traps for women. To these young males and their buddies, fucking was a way to confront the other, as well as a way to make themselves over, to leave behind white innocence and enter the world of experience. As is often the case in this society, they were confident that non-white people had more life experience, were more worldly, sensual, and sexual because they were different. And let me just say, they were doing the same thing, right? That, I mean, from a very young age, I was made to feel like I was a little girl if I didn't perform sexually. To these young males and their buddies, fucking was getting a bit of the other, in this case engaging sexual encounters with non-white females, was considered a ritual of transcendence, of movement out into a world of difference that would transform an acceptable rite of passage. The direct objective was not simply to sexually possess the other, it was to be changed in some way by the encounter. Naturally, the presence of the other, the body of the other, was seen as existing to serve the ends of white male desires. Writing about the way difference is recouped in the West in the primitive unconscious of modern art, or white skin, black masks, Foster reminds readers that Picasso regarded the tribal objects he had acquired as witnesses rather than as models. Poster critiques this positioning of the other, emphasizing that this recognition was contingent upon instrumentality. In this way, through affinity and use, the primitive is sent up into the service of the Western tradition, which is then seen to have partially produced it. A similar critique can be made of contemporary trends in interracial sexual desire and contact initiated by white males. They claim the body of the colored other instrumentally an unexplored terrain, a symbolic frontier that will be fertile ground for their reconstruction of the masculine norm, for asserting themselves as transgressive, desiring subjects. They call upon the other to be both witness and participant in this transformation. For white boys to openly discuss their desire for colored girls or boys publicly announces their break with the white supremacist past that would have such desire articulated only as taboo, as secret, as shame. They see their willingness to openly name their desire for the other as affirmation of cultural plurality, its impact on sexual preference and choice. Unlike racist white men who historically violated the bodies of black women, women of color, to assert their position as colonizer, which is very close to colonizer, conqueror, these young men see themselves as non-racist who choose to transgress racial boundaries within the sexual realm, not to dominate the other, but rather so that they can be acted upon, so that they can be changed utterly. Not at all attuned to those aspects of their sexual fantasies that irrevocably link them to collective white racist domination, they believe their desire for contact represents a progressive change in white attitudes towards non-whites. They do not see themselves as perpetuating racism. To them, the most potent indication of that change is the frank expression of longing, the open declaration of desire, the need to be intimate with dark others. The point is to be changed by this convergence of pleasure and otherness. One dares, acts on the assumption that the exploration into the world of difference, into the body of the other, will provide a greater, more intense pleasure than any that exists in the ordinary world of one's familiar racial group. And even though the conviction is that the familiar world will remain intact as one ventures outside it, the hopes is that they will re-enter the world no longer the same. The current wave of imperialist nostalgia, defined by Renato Rosaldo in Culture and Truth as nostalgia often found under imperialism, where people mourn the passing of what they themselves have transformed, or as a process of yearning for what one has destroyed. That is a form of mystification. One obscures contemporary cultural strategies deployed not to mourn, but to celebrate the sense of a continuum of primitivism. In mass culture, imperialist nostalgia takes the form of reenacting the re-ritualizing in different ways the imperialist colonizing journey as narrative fantasy of power and desire, of seduction by the other. This longing is rooted in the atavistic belief that the spirit of the primitive resides in the bodies of dark others, whose cultures, traditions, and lifestyles may indeed be irrevocably changed by imperialism, colonization, and racist domination. The desire to make contact with those bodies deemed other, with no apparent will to dominate, assuages the guilt of the past, even takes the form of a defiant gesture where one denies accountability and historical connection. Most importantly, it establishes a contemporary narrative where the suffering imposed by structures of domination on those designated other is deflected by an emphasis on seduction and longing, where the desire is not to make the other over in one's image, but to become the other. Whereas mournful imperialists nostalgia constitute the betrayed and abandoned world of the other as an accumulation of lack and loss, contemporary longing for the primitive is expressed by the projection onto the other of a sense of plenty, bounty, a field of dreams. Commenting on this strategy in Readings in Cultural Resistance, Hal Foster contends, difference is thus used productively indeed in a social order which seems to know no outside and which must contrive its own transgressions to reduce its limits. Difference is often fabricated in the interest of social control as well as commodity innovation. Masses of young people dissatisfied with U.S. imperialism, unemployment, lack of economic opportunity, afflicted by postmodern malaise of alienation, no sense of grounding, no redemptive identity, can be manipulated by cultural strategies that offer otherness as appeasement, particularly through commodification. The contemporary crisis of identity in the West, especially as experienced by white youth, are eased when the primitive is recouped via a focus on diversity and pluralism, which suggests the other can provide life-sustaining alternatives. Concurrently, diverse ethnic racial groups can also embrace this sense of specialness that histories and experience once seen as worthy only of disdain can be looked upon with awe. Cultural appropriation of the other assuages feelings of deprivation and lack that assault the psyches of radical white youth who choose to be disloyal to Western civilization. Concurrently, marginalized groups deemed other who have been ignored, rendered invisible, can be seduced by emphasis on otherness by its commodification because it offers the promise of recognition and reconciliation. When the dominant culture demands that the other be offered as sign that progressive political change is taking place, that the American dream can indeed be inclusive of difference, it invites a resurgence of essential cultural nationalism. The acknowledged other must assume recognizable forms. Hence, it is not African American culture formed in resistance to contemporary situations that surfaces, but nostalgic evocation of a glorious past. And even though the focus is often on the ways that this past was superior to the present, this cultural narrative relies on stereotypes of primitive, even as it eschews the term to evoke a world where Black people were in harmony with nature and with one another. This narrative is linked to white Western conceptions of the dark other, not to racial questioning of those representations. Should youth of any other color not know how to move closer to the other or how to get in touch with the primitive, consumer culture promises to show the way. It is within the commercial realm of advertising that the drama of otherness finds expression. Encounters with otherness are clearly marked as more exciting, more intense, and more threatening. The lure is the combination of pleasure and danger. In the cultural marketplace, the other is coded as having the capacity to be more alive, as holding the secret that will allow those who venture and dare to break with the cultural anhedonia, defined in Sam Keene's The Passionate Life as the insensitivity to pleasure, the incapacity for experiencing happiness, anhedonia. I have a lecture on anhedonia for sure. It is an epidemic. Psychologically speaking, we call it an epidemic. An epidemic of apathy. And experience sensual and spiritual renewal. But his untimely death, before his untimely death, Michael Foucault, the quintessential transgressive thinker in the West, confessed that he had real difficulties experiencing pleasure. I think that pleasure is a very difficult behavior. It's not as simple as that to enjoy oneself. And I must say, that's my dream. I would like and hope I die of an overdose of pleasure of any kind, because I think it's really difficult. And I always have the feeling that I do not feel the pleasure, the complete total pleasure. And for me, it's related to death, because I think that the kind of pleasure I would consider as the real pleasure would be so deep, so intense, so overwhelming that I couldn't survive it. I would die. Though speaking from the standpoint of his individual experience, Foucault voices a dilemma felt by many in the West. It is precisely that longing for the pleasure that has led the white West to sustain a romantic fantasy of the primitive and the concrete search for a real primitive paradise, whether that location be a country or a body, a dark continent, or dark flesh, perceived as the perfect embodiment of that possibility. Now, this I understand now all of a sudden as it relates to the Pilgrim's Regress, right? I get that, the longing for the otherness. But this to me just resonates more than that Clive Staples Lewis. It just does. But not to other people. Probably not to this culture even. This fantasy-driven culture that likes his Narnia, whatever Chronicles of Narnia, and Harry Potter. I'm kidding. But other books like that, including The Hobbit, for example. My son likes those books. I don't know if he likes Pilgrim's Regress, though. I don't like it. Have I mentioned that? I stopped reading it. Within this fantasy of otherness, the longing for pleasure is projected as a force that can disrupt and subvert the will to dominate. It acts to both mediate and challenge. In Lorraine Hansberry's play Les Blancs, Les Blancs. I don't know why there's an S though. It seems to me like it's not Les Blancs, it would be Les Blancs. It is the desire to experience closeness and community that leads the white American journalist Charles to make contact and attempt to establish a friendship with Shemby, the black revolutionary. Charles struggles to divert himself of white supremacist privilege, eschews the role of colonizer, and refuses racist exoticization of blacks. Yet he continues to assume that he alone can decide the nature of his relationship to a black person. Evoking the idea of a universal transcendent subject, he appeals to Shemby by repudiating the role of oppressor, declaring, "I am a man who feels like talking." When Shemby refuses to accept the familiar relationship offered him, refuses to satisfy Charles's longing for camaraderie and contact, he is accused of hating white men, calling attention to situations where white people have oppressed other white people. Shemby challenges Charles, declaring the race is a device, no more, no less, that it explains nothing at all. Pleased with this disavowal of the importance of race, Charles agrees, stating race hasn't a thing to do with it. Shemby then deconstructs the category race without minimizing or ignoring the impact of racism, telling him. Now this is good, right? Because the point they're making is that race has nothing to do with that hatred, right? Race has nothing to do with that hatred, and so they're going to deconstruct race without ignoring the impact of racism. Let's listen. I believe in the recognition of devices as devices, but I also believe in the reality of those devices. In one century, men choose to hide their conquest under religion and another under race. So you and I may recognize the fraudulence of the device in both cases, but the fact remains that a man who has a sword run through him because he will not become a Muslim or a Christian, or who is lynched in Mississippi or Zambia because he is black, is suffering the utter reality of that device of conquest. And it is pointless to pretend that it doesn't exist merely because it is a lie. Which is really interesting, isn't it? Because that's what I'm talking about in the classroom. It's all a lie. You know, you have your role, I have mine. Again and again, Chambly must make it clear to Charles that subject-to-subject contact between white and black, which signals the absence of domination of an oppressor-oppressed relationship, must emerge through mutual choice and negotiation. That's simply by expressing their desire for intimate contact with black people. White people do not eradicate the politics of racial domination as they are made manifest in personal interaction. Mutual recognition of racism, its impact both on those who are dominated and those who dominate, is the only standpoint that makes possible an encounter between races that is not based on denial and fantasy. The politics of racial domination are made manifest in personal interaction. All of a sudden, that sounds like nails on a chalkboard to me, and you don't even hear it. For it is the ever-present reality of racist domination of white supremacy that renders problematic the desire of white people to have contact with the other. Often it is this reality that is most masked when representations of contact between white and non-white, white and black appear in mass culture. One area where the politics of diversity and its concomitant insistence on inclusive representation have had serious impact is advertising. Exactly what I was thinking. Now that sophisticated market surveys reveal the extent to which poor and materially underprivileged people of all races, ethnicities consume products, sometimes in a quantity disproportionate to income, it has become more evident that these markets can be appealed to with advertising. Market surveys revealed that black people buy more Pepsi than other soft drinks, and suddenly we see more Pepsi commercials with black people in them. The world of fashion has also come to understand that selling products is heightened by the exploitation of otherness. The success of Benetton ads, which with their racially diverse images have become a model for various advertising strategies, epitomize this trend. Many ads that focus on otherness make no explicit comments or rely solely on visual messages, but the recent fall Tweeds catalog provides an excellent example of the way contemporary culture exploits notions of otherness with both visual images and context. The catalog cover shows a map of Egypt. Inserted into the heart of the country, so to speak, is a photo of a white man, an out of Africa type, holding Robert Redford type, holding an Egyptian child in his arms. Behind them is not the scenery of Egypt as modern city, but rather shadowy silhouettes resembling huts and palm trees. Inside the copy quotes Gustav Flaubert's comments from Flaubert in Egypt. For 75 pages, Egypt becomes a landscape of dreams and its darker-skinned people background, scenery to highlight whiteness, and the longing of whites to inhabit if only for a time, the world of the other. The front page copy declares, we did not want our journey to be filled with snapshots of an antique land. Instead, we wanted to rediscover our clothing in the context of a different culture. Was it possible, we wondered, to express our style in an unaccustomed way, surrounded by Egyptian colors, Egyptian textures, even bathed in an ancient Egyptian light? Is this not imperialist nostalgia at its best? Potent expression of longing for the primitive, our desires a bit of the other to enhance the blank landscape of whiteness. Nothing is said in the text about Egyptian people, yet their images are spread throughout its pages. Often their faces are blurred by the camera, a strategy which ensures that readers will not become more enthralled by the images of otherness than those of whiteness. The point of this photographic attempt at defamiliarization is to distance us from whiteness so that we will return to it more intensely. Talk about psychological foreplay for me. I mean, not that act. I'm talking about that kind of knowledge of psychology. Whoa. To defamiliarize yourself and distance yourself from whiteness so that you return to it more intensely. Whoa. That is some deep psychological white supremacist theology, rules for employment, catechism, but there's another word I'm thinking of. But I think catechism might do. In most of the snapshots, all carefully selected and posed, there is no mutual looking. One desires contact with the other, even as one wishes boundaries to remain intact. When bodies can contact one another, touch, it almost always a white hand doing the touching. When bodies contact one another, touch, it almost always a white hand doing the touching, white hands that rest on the bodies of colored people unless the other is a child. One snapshot of intimate contact shows two women with their arms linked, the way close friends might link arms. One is an Egyptian woman identified by a caption that reads, with her husband and baby. Medio Abbas, 22, leads a gypsy life. The second woman is a white-skinned model. The linked hands suggest these two women share something, have a basis of contact, and indeed they do. They resemble one another, look more alike than different. The message again is that primitivism, though more apparent in the other, also resides in the white self. It is not the world of Egypt, of gypsy life, that is affirmed by the snapshot, but the ability of white people to roam the world making contact. Wearing pants while standing next to her dark-skinned sister who wears a traditional skirt, the white woman appears to be cross-dressing, an ongoing theme in tweeds. Visually, the image suggests that she and first world white women like her are liberated, have greater freedom to roam than darker women who live peripatetic lifestyles. Yeah, that's the word. Significantly, the catalog that followed this one focused on Norway. There, the people of Norway are not represented only the scenery. Are we to assume that white folks from this country are as at home in Norway as they are here, so there is no need for captions and explanations? In this visual text, whiteness is the unifying feature, not culture. Of course, for tweeds to exploit otherness, to dramatize whiteness, while in Egypt it cannot include darker skinned models, since the play on contrast that is meant to highlight whiteness could not happen, nor could the exploitation that urges consumption of the other whet the appetite in quite the same way, just as inclusion of darker skinned models in the Norway issue might suggest that the West is not as unified by whiteness as this visual context suggests. Essentially speaking, both catalogs evoke a sense that white people are homogeneous and share white bread culture. Where are we on time? We're at 50 minutes, and I think I'm going to stop there because we'll be here for another 20 at least. I think. Not at least, but about another 20, and that's a lot of time. So I'm going to stop there and get my little... Oh, here it is. Fact card, that is my bookmark. And stop there. Stop right there. And we will continue on and get into the next chapter. Revolutionary Black Women Making Ourselves Subject. These chapters are quite long. There's 12 chapters in the book. Okay, so we're going to stop there. Let me just take a look at, while you're here with me. So, yeah, 20 pages. The next one is 20 pages. The next one is 18. And then 9. So we have varying sized chapters. So we may be able to get caught up. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, caught up in whatever kind of, theoretical way you think we could get caught up. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, and we are here on December 17th on day 286 in the classroom. Transgress. I transgress in my speech. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, where we are not so worried about all the gossip that's going on, all the fraudulence, all the lies, and we're just trying to stay focused. And when we do that, we really do build up a healthier mind, a healthier body, and a healthier spirit. And that's what, oh, I don't have it. And that's what we need to do. Never mind. I was trying to do the Jim Henson hands, but that was a pathetic attempt. Thanks so much for joining me.